this idea of identity, I feel like I'm just going to say the same thing I've said a million times, but when you approach a situation of any kind, sometimes there's it's important to figure out, well, where are you in this, or who are you in this, right? Which is, for example, a role identity. And obviously in life we play roles, and whether it's a momentary role or whether it's a more consistent role, like at your work, or a lifelong role as a certain member of your family, right? You're your father's son and your mother's son, Sky's husband. And so you orient according to that role and play that role and experience a certain identity via that role, and it impacts, everything. But then, of course, in a larger context, that role isn't an actual identity. It's not who you really are. And of course, you get to a certain point, let's just take a vertical scale. If you go high enough, who are you? Well, you're God, is what a lot of spiritual models will say. And of course, that's this abstract idea. But I think it's useful as an abstract idea. And as you come down from there, at a certain point, there's just this conscious presence. So one simple model would be God, spirit, soul, higher self, mind, body. Right. But you could slice and dice that.
That's the simple model.
Yeah.
6 things. So I'm glad you didn't shoot any higher than that, as far as how complex it should be.
Yeah. So just this idea of being consciousness, or being soul, or being higher self, or being awareness, versus being thoughts or being emotions, let alone being a physical object, right? So again, in our mind, we can have these identities, because it's our mind it's the ego mind that's concerned about identity. The ego mind's going, wait, who am I in this? What am I? Am I good or am I bad? Am I useful or not? And of course, those are valid concerns, but we get so lost in that part of the mind that we lose touch with actual essence, with actual consciousness, with actual beingness. And this idea that the road back to being in touch with actual self, actual essence, actual consciousness tends to involve accepting, to use Jung's term, shadow material. Because the very denial of the bad thing in you, whether you think the bad thing is anger, or whether you think the bad thing is vulnerability, or whether you think the bad thing is sadness, or the bad thing is greed, whatever the bad thing is that you literally block from your conscious attention, whatever the thing is, the act of blocking it separates you out from your beingness. So that idea that facing the darkness, facing the both sides of the duality, reconciling opposites, is the path back to awakening, back to self, actual self. And it's, again, it's one of those things that it seems like just an easy concept to say or to understand, but then the actual practice of it is very confusing and very not just confusing conceptually, but seems to literally involve most often a real destabilization of the ego mind.
Yeah. I think it's where like that window thing is kind of like what I hear you talk about a lot. It kind of resonates as you're describing it, is that like as you get down into these, like, keep maximizing a smaller and smaller window, it's that much more disorienting when you realize it's just a window. It's like, you have this like cascading tile of windows as you like go into like the depths of like, am I good or bad? And then you're so focused on this tiny thing that when you come off it, it's like, how did I ever think that was everything?
Right.
So as far as the disorientation of it, or the destabilization of ego,
there's that part, the mind experience, if you will, and the confusion and the disorientation that the mind has. And then another problem is the body shows up with energies that the mind is absolutely terrified of. And they're kind of two different problems that obviously interrelate, but
call that like thoughts and feelings, like the mind experience versus the body experience.
Yeah. Yeah, because and then it's right back to that whole idea of the mind or the ego being this manager of body, and the idea that ego's only capable of managing it to a degree. Just a few different thoughts that, because obviously the general idea that I'm always talking about is that it's soul, it's consciousness that can manage it. The ego having we're going to need a bigger boat moment, my understanding is that's the ego mind getting an actual look at body, an actual experience of the unconscious in a way that the person's ego mind is faced with overwhelm. Now that can happen just as anxiety, that can happen as an experience of dread, it can happen as an experience of I'm dying, it can happen as an experience of I'm out of control and I'm going to hurt myself or hurt someone else. It can just be a panic attack. But the general idea is that there's this upsurge of body, upsurge of energies in a way that the ego mind, again, just becomes aware, oh shit, like I can't manage this. Like we're going over, we're in trouble here.
Yeah.
And we've all had this, and at least momentarily. And it's a real important thing to sort of recognize that well, wait a second, wow, we're not, our ego mind, especially just our cognitive rational mind, is only capable of so much.
Yeah.
And all you got to do is put a person under a certain kind of stress, get them tired enough, get them drunk enough, get them high enough, take away certain structures that they live by. And it's a pretty quick trip to body overwhelming mind.
Yeah.
But obviously
it's terrifying.
Yeah. And so much of life needs to involve shoring up and securing our various structures so that we don't get thrown overboard. And that's important. to a degree. And then there's also, okay, it's like there's three different modes. It can be how do you make sure the environment is such that it doesn't overwhelm the person's mind? Then there's how do you strengthen the person's mind to deal with more? And then there's, okay, what do you do in the experience of overwhelm? Is there a different mode to go into when the mind is no longer in command of a particular situation? So for example, if you put someone on a horse, if you put me on a horse, I've only ridden horses, I don't know, 20 times in my life, probably, and not for very long. So I was
surprised. That's a lot of times to me. I was like two times I've been on a horse, and it did whatever it wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not much better on a horse than you, but if you put me on a horse right now, unlike, let's say, a 5-year-old that, and it would depend, maybe the 5-year-old would be awesome at it, but let's say certain people, you put them on a horse and they're going to freak out and they're just going to go into a get me off this thing, right? And they're going to stay in that mode of panic. Maybe they're just going to fall off. Maybe they're going to get bucked off. Maybe they're just, gonna scream and hang on for dear life, but not move towards learning to ride the horse, right? If you put me on a horse right now, my first impulse is going to be, okay, trying to remember what the hell it is you do. Certainly going to try to get my feet in the stirrups and get a hold of the reins. I'm gonna immediately try to make friends with the horse and have the horse not hate me and want to get me, start bucking like crazy or something. And I'm going to go into a management mode of, okay, how do I not get hurt here, right? And I'm just saying these are two very different modes. Now, maybe I'd successfully, depending on the horse, if it's a tame horse and is used to, idiots like me being on it and not really doing the right thing, but it tolerates it, then I'm good. If it's a horse that's never been ridden or something, then I'm going to be in trouble. But I'm just saying those two different modes are huge in life. Which one are we doing? And maybe I want to get off the horse, but maybe, I need to be in manage until someone can help me get off that horse. So at any given moment, what are we doing? Are we complaining that our environment is such that our mind feels overwhelmed, or are we working on our mind getting more knowledgeable, more open, more understanding, so that we can see that, oh, wait a minute, I can actually handle this, right? And it's surprising what humans can handle. It's surprising what humans can deal with if they go into a mindset that accepts the situation. But that's got to be an initial step, right? If you're just in the resist, get away, escape mode, at some point you got to turn towards the danger. You got to turn towards the threat. You got to turn towards the thing that you wish wasn't so. And you got to try to figure out, okay, how does one do this? How does one deal with this? How does one tolerate this? And it doesn't mean you like it. It just means you accept that challenge. And it's a big shift from how do I not have to face this to this is something I have to face.
Yeah.
But the facing it, the accepting it, is a shift in the mind, a shift in consciousness that makes all the difference. I'm trying to think, if we do an experiential, like maybe is there something that you're dreading right now in your life? Is there something you're worried about, or
I'd say I'm not dreading it, but it's like uncomfortable. So I have a show next week. It's at a place I've never worked in. So just be a lot of new things that I have to do in a context that I've never worked in, or like the same things in a new context.
Okay. So when you bring your attention to that, there one urge, one tendency is to go towards the fear, contract, block out, hide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could go in that direction and quit your job or play sick or try to get away. But obviously you're deciding, at least so far, okay, this is something I'm going to have to face. Even though you're wishing that it was an experience that you felt like totally adept and you got this and it was going to be piece of cake.
Yeah.
So you're deciding, okay, I got to go into a mindset of dealing with this. So literally you got to go into a certain scope and allow the experience, allow the event to be a reality in your world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And notice just that initial step. Like right now, don't try to win, don't try to get it done, don't try to, like, the game hasn't started yet. Just bring your conscious attention to what is the game, what is the arena, right? What is and just kind of hold the whole thing. And you're not going in, to the ring.
That's the tendency.
Yeah. So like boxers or MMA artists or wrestlers or whatever, they're standing there and it's, in any sport or any activity, but when they go, they go in and now they're in the ring and they're standing in their corner and it's an intense moment, right? Because it's like, oh shit, here we are. This is gonna be, mm-hmm. This is gonna be intense. There's a lot riding on this, all kinds of people watching, blah, 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 whatever the scenario is. But there's nothing to do yet. They're waiting for the ref to do whatever the ref's doing and blah, blah, blah. And the bell hasn't rung yet, so they're just waiting.
Yeah.
And it's obviously could be a very anxious moment. And it's interesting to look at those fighters and, and watch the mindset that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And typically there's a gaze that
you can tell their container is like the ring.
Yeah, right.
There's less awareness of what's going on outside of it.
Yeah.
And then within that, there's also just their relation to themselves, but you can tell that there's a shielding around what's actually going on inside that.
Yeah. Not only are they blocking out outside the ring, but ideally they are holding an open space for inside the ring, which is different than if they go into a contraction, a subject-object split where now their attention is let's just say their own body. Because if their conscious mind isn't including the opponent, then the opponent is much more of a mystery, right? Than if their conscious mind is holding the whole ring and whatever might go on in the ring. When our conscious mind holds a container, whatever's inside that container, we have this felt sense of. It'd be analogous to having your hands on something versus not, right? If you're riding your bike and you let go of the handlebars, it's a different situation than when you got your hands on the handlebars, right? If you're riding with no hands and you sense the handlebars starting to, or the front wheel starting to turn, you sense it, right? Even though your hands aren't, you're not sensing it with your hands, you're sensing it with your balance, right? And or your eyes see the handlebars start to turn. And then you got to lean and do a thing to get the wheel to straighten out again, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a way of riding, and some people can ride, very well and for a long ways with no hands, doing it that way. But it's much easier to just have your hands on the handlebars, and then you're sensing it in a way that you have much more control. And
Yeah.
So I'm saying that's an analogy for, if you're including a thing in your conscious awareness, it's like you got your hands on it. Whereas if you don't, it's much more mysterious.
Yeah.
Again, not only do we feel more connected to that which we have our conscious mind including, but we have more of a sense of it. We have more of a felt sense. If you're same way, if you're going to wrestle with a guy to tie up with that person, you're in a different mode because you have this felt sense of what are they doing.
Yeah.
Versus if you are not touching them.
Yeah. How does that relate to like field versus point?
Yeah, good question. So it's when you're in that conscious mode, it's a field awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you go into that subject object, now you're a point and the other thing is a point, or you're a point and the other thing is a field, and you're just toast because you're aware of the field being way bigger than the point.
Okay. The grappling part, to me, it's a second step, right? So there's the initial field of like potential when you are at either corner of the ring. And then when you start to grapple, there's kind of like, it's a dialectic then, because there's in a sense a series of points, but still within that field. There's different ways to look at it, because like you could see that the entire grappling is still a field, but there'd be like a level of skill, right? Like how identified you are with a particular state of the interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Like when the actual fight starts, when the actual thing you're still being aware of starts, how that shifts. Because I think you're saying that this conscious awareness of being like in touch with it continues even once it begins. So what does that shift like? So like if like the initially in the experiential, we're just talking about like, here's this thing coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once it starts, because like the tendency is to identify with a hypothetical in the apprehension of what's coming.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, like at least with work, like it's easier not to do that in the moment, but leading up to it is harder.
Yeah, because you can't. It's just remaining unknown, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, once it gets going, now you can take all this energy that's amped up and you can direct it.
Yeah.
When you hold a spatial awareness and then you allow that, okay, there's infinite probability that can happen within this field.
Mm-hmm.
Or even if it's a limited field, right? Even if it's, again, if I say, okay, I'm gonna tell you a number 1 through 10. Okay, well now it's a limited field. There's 10 options. But you still got to sit there and hold this field for it could be any one of them.
Yeah.
And just notice right now that thing where when I say that, okay, you're just holding all 10 numbers at once.
Yeah.
And if I say, well, the number is 7, okay, now you can lock onto 7.
I fucking knew it was 7. I knew it was 7 last time. It was 7 this time. I knew it. So it's a very rude exercise. That's all.
Right? Yeah, it's
You
offensive.
just watch the person. I shared that one with Scotch. That was pretty funny too.
Did the did murderous rage immediately flood her mind?
Well, it's a fun example because it doesn't have to be like, it's just like, you know, flirting with murderous rage
Yeah, right,
because it's a number. But
right.
but
But
yeah,
you can tell, like, the door to
it's
hell
intense.
starts to open up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my experience anyway.
So to hold the could be this number, could be that. Even if it's just a choice between two things, it's like, can you? And it's a very different activity.
Yeah.
And to stay in that mode, one is more conscious, one is more relaxed, one's more secure, one is more able to function, and even function in real precise ways.
Hmm.
When you're driving, if you're in an open, conscious spatial awareness, there's 100 different things going on in your field of view. You're just watching and responding. Is the light going to turn? Is that pedestrian going to walk out in front of me? Is the car on my right going to come over into my lane? You know, is the road slick? I mean, there's just a ton of things going on. And you just stay in this mode of, you know, what do you need to respond to and what do you not? But if you shift modes, if your car starts to slide on the ice, and even if, okay, now it's not sliding anymore, it's like suddenly, bam, everything tends to collapse. And
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you're a point in a big dangerous world of objects that you can't control, you know. And if you go into that mode, you know, it's literally like going into this kind of mode. And if you're going to try to be in that pointed focus and look at that car and then look at the light and then look at the pedestrian and then look at, you know, it's like you can't keep up. And so you're going to freak out. And what do you got to do to get back to feeling okay? You got to get the focus to go back out into including all these things.
Yeah.
And that's so obvious when you're driving, but we don't realize that we get stuck in those modes in all kinds of other contexts. And so you can go, you know, if you're planning for a party and then suddenly it's like, oh my God, there's 500 details. And if you get locked into, you know, what about this? What about this? What about this? It's like you're going to be in a mode that's way more anxious and insecure than if you go into a mode of, okay, there's 500 things and I'm working on them. And, you know, what seems like the next most important thing. And it's just a different mode.
Yeah.
So it all sounds so obvious, but notice right now, when you think about this event coming up at work, but just go into a conscious awareness of it, find that contextual space. And at the moment, just allow that, well, it could go super well and it could go super bad. Right? There's a whole spectrum of things that could happen. And at the moment, if you just hold space for the whole spectrum, what happens? What do you notice?
Feels like icebergs in the water. It feels like I can like feel the emotion of like what it would feel like for it to go bad.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel like things I need to remember to do come up. It feels like defeating in one sense because like I would like to be able to know how it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the important point. What happens when you allow that defeat, allow that powerlessness?
And I get angry.
And then what are you supposed to do with that anger, right?
Yeah.
because your aggression, and by aggression I just mean natural aggression. I'm using that word just as the energy that you were going to use to take care of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The ego mind starts going, well, what do I do with the aggression?
Right.
Where do I direct it? Right. And one of the go-tos that the ego mind does is, oh, I'll direct it at myself,
Mm-hmm.
which is not good. But notice, to sit and hold an open space for that aggression and to let the aggression be there, but let the aggression just move around and permeate that open field that you're holding. And notice that you can handle that aggression. It even starts, if you go into this acceptance, it starts to feel like vitality, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yeah.
There starts to be a security, right?
Yeah, it feels less anxious. Like there's not as much it doesn't have to be like directed.
Yeah. Yeah. So your mind is orienting to a field, not a point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then wherever the energy moves around in that field, it's no threat, because you're not trying to be some point in the energy, right? Like if the energy was wind, your sail's down, right? Like it doesn't matter the same way as if you had your sail up. You're just letting the wind blow wherever the wind wants to blow right now. So, but do you feel how you're in a state right now that is not your default state?
Yeah.
You're usually grabbing, repressing, and then looking for places to, constantly needing to vent that aggression, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's biting your lip or chewing gum or tapping your foot on the floor or any, starting an argument with Sky or ruminating about something, or like there's just this constant neurotic activity, right?
Mm.
Which is literally all an attempt to manage that energy. But when you stay open and just allow that aggression, notice that, well, the mind starts to, the ego mind starts to become aware that it's sitting in an ocean of energy, right? And that there's not just a sky above that's non-dual and peaceful or whatever, but there's an ocean below that is way deeper and bigger and more powerful than your boat, right?
Mm. Yeah.
If you shift into the mode where you're not supposed to manage, you're not supposed to hold and control those energies. You're supposed to sail them. You're supposed to surf them. You accept that there's that environment. So if you go outside and it's cold, it's cold. You're not supposed to try to somehow fix that. You're supposed to deal with it. If it's windy, you deal with the wind. If you're in the water and the current's moving this way or that way, or there's a wave, it's this very different mode, right?
Yeah.
The surfer can complain about the waves all, but it's like, what's your point? Like you either got to, the surfer is accepting that the surf is what it is, and then paddling where the surfer needs to paddle to get on the wave and ride it, right?
Yeah.
So you feel how that the energy from below, it comes up, and for example, it comes up into the first chakra.
Mm-hmm.
When you ease up and allow more energy to move, suddenly there's energetic charge that seems to exist, right?
Yeah.
And you're going, well, I want to put it towards organizing or getting prepared for or strategizing about this event that's coming up, and what can I do to,
No.
and that's fine. But what about when you come back to it? There's nothing to do right now. There's nothing to do. I'm just going to allow this open state, and then let it go into your feet. Let it go into your pelvis. Let it come up your spine. Let it go up through your viscera. Let it go into your mouth, into your jaw. Let it move through your shoulders. Let it go into your mind in a way where you become aware, wow, there's an energetic charge flowing through me that is if you're in your car and the engine is on and you are pushing the gas pedal down a little bit, it's like, okay, here, there's some charge here that's I either better stay on the brake, or I better make sure I know what I'm doing here, because this energy wants to move. And you feel how you can very easily hit an edge where your mind starts to go, whoa, wait a minute, that's kind of too much, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to need to behave that.
Yeah.
And it's like, what does that mean? Does that mean like you feel how you're sort of riding that edge right now?
Yeah. It feels like sad. I feel like it's like too much of my personal pattern in the like coming up today.
You're noticing how much you clamp down on that? Is that?
Yeah. And then it's just like memories of like, my life and like what have I done to like manage this like at different times in my life, and like what was the environment like, and what are the like super ego judgments of that, what are the like physical blocks of that. And then that's like starting to like go into like one of those windows, and then it's like it's kind of another means of like limiting it. It feels like the edge of it is too much.
Yeah. And too much what?
Too much of like something I don't think I am.
Okay. So you feel that threshold between, or let me ask you this. Are you noticing first chakra? You feel like you can discern?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so this primordial ground with its charge is coming up into your first chakra, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then your first chakra could behave it.
Yeah.
And if you were tasked with, okay, you gotta run around the lake right now. It's like, well, then that energy would be useful, right? You could use that energy to run around the lake. Or right now, if we were going to try to pick up your desk and we are going to move it to a different, but it's like, oh, well, that energy then would be useful. You could channel it into that body movement, right?
Yeah.
But then when you notice the experience, okay, but what if there's nothing to do with it? You got to just sit there.
Right.
Then notice that threshold where, so just choose to go up a level and just be aware that, okay, there's this charge and there's nowhere to go with it right now, right?
Yeah.
So it's just moving, but your mind is staying off it, meaning you're not grabbing it to harness it to do something. So you have to hold this space that brings this certain kind of detachment, this emptiness, this awareness of not having the satisfaction of that energy plugging into something.
Yeah.
Feel that?
Yeah.
And so that's a certain kind of angst, a certain kind of suffering, a certain kind of, you feel it's a certain kind of maturity.
Yes. Yeah. I think what the shift was from like for me, like what happened was like there was this empowering sense to it, and then eventually shifted to shame.
Ah, yep. And say more about the shame.
Well, it's tough. It's tough because there's like there's so much shame. There's like the like historical shame about any time that like it felt like it wasn't, there wasn't a mature holding of it. And then there's also just the shame of like some sense of like, why haven't I figured this out yet?
Mm.
So there's and then it all felt really personal, and then I just didn't want to like be here anymore.
So tell me if this all gets too personal. But what it feels like to me is, in a very psychoanalytic way of talking about it, what's needing to happen is that aggression be owned more, be
Mm-hmm.
be made more conscious, right? Be more consciously accepted.
Yeah.
Now that I'm aware that the ego mind, like we've talked about before, my general pattern is my ego mind's too cathected to it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're driving your car and you're in the driver's seat and you're driving down the street, you need to orient a certain way and be very, very, and stay with that, right? You need to, until you get that car stopped, you got to stay in that mode. If you're in the passenger seat, ideally you can come out of that mode. Certainly, once you get out of your car and aren't driving, you can come out of that mode, right? Of spatially orienting the way that you're orienting when you're driving, right?
Yeah.
My first chakra, as I sit here, even though I'm sitting here alone in this room, I'm talking with you in a first chakra way. It'd be hard for you to pose much of a threat to me, right? My first chakra is in that. My mind is including first chakra awareness and that kind of energy and that kind of mode is happening in my system. And that aggression is there. The aggression feels like it's good because it's my ability to face world. So there's a certain confidence, a certain strength, a certain ambition, et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, when really there's nothing to do with first chakra aggression at the moment, then it's like, well, okay, what do I do with it? Do I grind my teeth? Do I just sit and deal with paranoid thoughts? Do I hold tension in my tissue in ways that I don't even realize it?
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, I'm probably in a way more hyper aroused state. My adrenals are working harder than yours are probably. I live in that mode of I'm on watch. I'm not just accepting that, well, physically you're fine, again, just like the person that can't just sit in the car and be on their phone or look around or not, like the person that has to backseat drive and be as tracking the road as if they were driving.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm tracking the road like I'm driving, even right now, sitting here by myself in my first chakra. And it's like, wow, you would think I can come out of that mode right now.
Yeah.
And if something happens that requires it, then I should be able to shift back into it. But I'm aware it's a pattern of mine, and it's in those character structures, it's more the psychopathic mode.
Yeah.
Whereas if yours is more the masochistic, what I was trying to get at is, okay, so when I start to let go and move towards that, again, I start to feel a bit unsafe, and I just start getting messages like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Like, this isn't safe to just sit here and not be tracking like what's going on.
Yeah.
And if I stayed in it long enough, I'd probably arrive at shame. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then if we go back to you, what happens if right now, just even if you're just an actor, it's like, okay, you're supposed to be in a mode right now where you think someone is going to be coming into the room with a gun, and so you're ready. And you feel how, okay, well, then immediately you start to shift what you're doing energetically, right?
Yeah.
And notice, what did you just, because you shifted in your mind and you hooked into that aggression.
Yeah.
In a way that suddenly that aggression was your friend instead of your enemy.
Right.
And that's just an interesting thing, right? Because you default to having it be enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just feel it right now. You're in a mode where you're hooked up in a way you weren't hooked up.
So I should be more paranoid.
Well, that's the thing is, okay, yes, you should move into more paranoid, but then you should work through the paranoia into the next thing.
Got it. You told me the other day I needed to be more narcissistic too. So it's quite a list I've got going.
Yeah. So notice, as you sit in the paranoid now, right?
Yeah.
But you're more empowered. There's less shame, right?
Yeah.
Like, fuck the shame. I got to deal with this guy that's going to come in with a gun, right?
Right.
After I kill him, I'll go back to my.
Yeah.
Okay, but so if you stay in that paranoid state, but now same thing, go up above it to where there's nothing to do with that paranoia. There's nothing to do with that aggression at this level. Now, do you have to default back to shame, or is there a way to go?
That feels like psychosis.
Okay. Hence the psychopathic.
Yeah.
So if you stay with that and just say more, like why is it psychosis, or how do you experience
Well, it's
that?
like the spiraling up versus spiraling down. It's like, yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
Like shame is like zooming in on something. It feels like this is like exploding out.
Yes. That's exactly right. And in human development, that movement out is development. It's individuation. It's facing your environment, right? It's going from being a kid just oriented to, am I a good boy or not, according to parent, to I gotta face world.
Yeah.
And world is chaotic. Like, what does it take to face world? It takes being fucking psychotic. Right?
Yeah.
If you're really gonna like you start to notice, well, wait, like you're not psychotic. You're noticing that, holy shit, the environment's psychotic. Meaning there's chaos out there. Like that's an accurate experience.
Mm.
So how do you sit there and feel okay knowing that there's a world of chaos around you? Well, you have to do that thing I was talking about. Your mind has to go out there and hold space for chaos, right?
Yeah.
But do you feel how when you do that, you're accepting.
You're accepting it within, your own.
Yeah. And it becomes, okay, so what, right? The world's psychotic. You can, you're psychotic. So
yeah,
you're just holding that. And then you feel how you find this equilibrium. You find so the mind state you're in right now, do you feel, can you tell that, for example, I'm in that mindset more than you?
Yeah, but I don't know if it's like reassuring. I don't know. It's like
Yeah, I'm not.
It's good though. It's because there's like the feeling of it, just the feeling alone of it is a little alien. But like, I think because the times I've felt it have not felt like normal.
Yeah.
So to experience it, it's like, well, like I can feel that it's okay, but it's also not normal. And so there's like a little like it feels like mania to me. But like a different like color of it.
Yeah. Okay, but notice if you just allow that mania in your mind, but hold space for it.
But the mania of it is like getting excited about it. Does that make like?
Yep.
It's like deciding, oh, this is everything. It's like, well, no, it's not everything.
The conscious container that you're holding right now is not your default conscious container. Yes.
Yeah.
But as you stay with it, what will happen is you'll be less and less trying to organize the content, and you'll just hold the container.
Yeah.
In the same way that if you're looking at a stadium of 40,000 people, right? You just be aware, wow, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But you're not trying to figure out what each person's doing, right? You just are holding like that's like total chaos compared to interacting with one person, right?
Yeah.
But you just allow it. Some people freak out. They don't like to be in a stadium of 40,000 people. It feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
Why? Well, because they can't go into that mind state where they can just feel comfortable going, yeah, there's this sea of 40,000 people. Like their mind is overwhelmed by the processing. And it's like, well, you're zoomed in too much. You got to zoom way out. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're zooming out right now. And then you're aware that, okay, when I zoom out like that, there's all this energy. It's like, yeah, but just allow it. But notice that your aggression has more of a free flow, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's nice. Every now and again, I remind myself that somebody's going to come in and shoot me, and then it kind of like, it helps.
Right. Because you need to stay good guy, right? Because if there isn't an enemy, well, like, what are you supposed to do with all that aggression, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be aimed at something, and geez, if there's no bad guy to aim it at, it's like, well, you can go back to aiming at you and collapse down into shame.
You can do that whenever I want.
Yeah. So if you were drafted into the military, wouldn't you imagine that, okay, you're going to need to sort of go into this mode and stay in this mode more of the time than before you're drafted into the military, right?
Yeah.
Because the right from boot camp, you're going to be asked to stay in this fucking mode and be ready to aggress and to track in this way and to harness, have your aggression ready to fucking go.
Yeah.
And follow orders and do the thing and run over here and run over there and shoot this and shoot that and do 20 push-ups. and just be ready to fucking go like that and be on it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, like, why? What's all that? What's all that for? Because that is all going to be in the service of defeating the enemy, right?
Yeah.
So that aggression, that power, that violence, that movement of energy, that death, that ability to cause death, that movement towards destruction, you're harnessing that so that you can direct it at the thing that you're going to fucking destroy.
Right.
And it's easy to go, well, geez, that doesn't sound like peace and love, right? That doesn't sound like how shouldn't we try to get humans to stop doing that? And I'm saying we need to transcend it. We can't hold it back.
Yeah.
Holding it back leaves us depressed and anxious and ashamed and physically somaticizing it and projecting it in the wrong places. And it leaves us weak, feeble human beings.
Yeah.
But I'm aware that moving towards it is violent and dangerous and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
And there's a real loss of innocence in it because you start to recognize I'm a fucking killing machine. Like that's in there, that's in me.
Yeah.
And again, what's super important if you're confronted with that, you better have an enemy. Soldiers that go to war and then come back and or even while they're there and there's not a clear enemy or there's not a clear mission or there's not, they've been trained to harness all this aggression in themselves, and then for our own psyche and self-esteem, we have to remain the hero, right? We have to have it be for a reason that's good.
Yeah.
So I think humans in general struggle with this way more than we realize. Whether you ever go in the military or not,
Yeah.
it's just there, this aggression. And it's like, okay, how do you become an empowered, individuated human being that has harnessed this aggression, but then obviously transcend it to where you're not just trying to look for an enemy all the time to aggress at.
Yeah.
Right? What's that next level where? And it's like, well, for example, this is again one of the big psychoanalytic insights is that very aggression can be used to love. It can be used to take care of. It can be used to build stuff. It can be used to, to teach and to lead and to cooperate. And so that the enemy, so to speak, ceases to be something that you have to hate, and it just becomes the dualistic tension that's there that, you use that aggression to chop wood, you use it to carry water, you use it to have the courage to face the continued difficulties so that you can show up and be there for your loved ones. So all that aggression, all that anger, all that whatever, it becomes, right, it's online in a way, again, serves a higher and higher purpose. But what's required to shift, because like you said, when you shift it up out of when you let the energy move, but then you went up above to, well, there's nothing to aggress at right now. Well, that there was an immediate death, there was immediate sadness, there was an immediate what then, right?
Yeah.
This energy then just seems bad. It's just plaguing me. It's just torturing me if I'm not going to hook into it and cathect in a way that it feels like it's good. And it's like, yeah, but when you go to that next thing where it feels empty and dead and frustrating and whatever, it's like you're building that next container.
Mm. And then I'm just, well, it's like, how long does that take? God damn it.
What about, just as an example, this event that you have coming up, right? There's this aggression, and then you can hold this scope, and it's like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to get in that ring, and I'm going to, go through it. But then notice, what if, just hypothetically, actually now you're going to shift, and you're going to actually coach someone else through it. So you're off the hook now. The person that's doing it is on the hook.
Mm-hmm.
But you're willing to help out. Do you feel how, well, that's a shift?
Mm-hmm.
So to go from player to coach, it's a different contextual space, and it's a different mode. And so when you're in that mode, you notice, okay, well, you're more comfortable, right? But it's a different kind of work. It's work, but the work's different. It's one thing to say, just give me the damn ball and get out of my way.
Right.
It's another to say, hey, we got to work as a team here. Let's run. And then it's different again to be the coach and be watching the whole thing. And again, it's just these different contextual spaces. And when we go, you can go into that larger contextual space, even if you're a player. And I'm saying that's required to take your aggression and.
No, I like it. I like it. I'm just kind of, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, like taking it and running with it versus like the mindset of a coach. I like it. And then also the like feeling that context while still being a player is an interesting shift. And so I see how that's like a shift in how the aggression is like translated.
It disperses into a larger context.
Yeah.
So then there isn't the paranoia, there isn't the psychosis.
That's pretty wild. Because in your mind, you're two people then.
Yeah, right.
And so the container is like giving it to some other part of yourself, but the shift it's trippy.
That's totally it. It's that duality is there. We have that dual aspect to our psyche. And ideally, we're aware of both.
Yeah.
They're both there and they're relating to each other.
But I like how we've kind of come to it in this particular context that like, here's this activity I'm doing and one role or identity that I have with it. And that I also have this other identity.
Yeah.
And that identity can be related back to that particular context and then share in the load of it.
Yeah. And that's what's happening when people are talking to themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people can be doing various things when they're talking to themselves, but
I mean, yeah, it sounds crazy in one sense, but it's not like talking to yourself and like trying to reassure yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's times when even if you don't make a habit of talking to yourself, there's times I think that we all hit where, every once in a while I'm freaked out enough, to where sometimes, again, even looking in a mirror and it's like, all right, Lance, like, what the fuck are you doing? Or all right, Lance, you got this, calm down, like get focused here or get whatever. And it's a very important thing that ideally it's hooked up. Ideally it's hooked up. So you notice right now sitting there, when you go into that mode, of them both being there. There's the Jeff that is the individual that's doing the thing, and then there's the you that's right,
Yeah.
first person and third person. And when
Yeah.
you let them come together, there's presence, right?
Yeah.
And you feel how like that happens when we feel confident, when we feel sure. If there's, what's a game you're good at? Are you good at pool or ping pong or card
I'm
games?
good at foosball.
Okay. So right now, if I said, I will smoke you in foosball.
Yeah.
Just notice.
Say you can try.
Right. So notice that first person and that third person and you came together and the light went on.
Yeah, totally.
And you seem to like have this secure confidence of like, bring it.
Yeah.
And when you be aware of that state, do you feel how there's essence, there's presence?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then if I said, hey, I need you to help me dismantle this bomb. Right? It's like, oh, whoa.
No thanks.
And it's a weird thing, right? It's like, well, why are you separating your consciousness from your ego self right now? Like, is that's going to make you like more easy, like
right, better at bomb defuse?
Right.
Yeah.
Like we do the wrong thing. We go the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Now, it's easy to say, well, yeah, but if I stay in that confidence state, I feel sort of manic and narcissistic and arrogant and,
right.
And it's like, I don't know if that might be good if I'm playing foosball, but it might not be good if we're trying to dismantle the bomb. I should maybe be a little more reserved and careful and cautious.
Yeah.
But it's okay. But notice, just as a little exercise here, stay in that mode and then also intentionally be aware, oh shit, we're going to do something very, that we need to be very cautious about. But can you stay present and be and notice that, yeah, you can.
You just needed a couple seconds to react to the idea. Get situated to the new context.
Yeah. If you take the psychoanalytic character structures, and let's just say you use schizoid, oral, masochistic, psychopathic, rigid, which is a model that I like. First learned it through Barbara Brennan and her stuff. But it's based on Wilhelm Reich's character defenses. There's a developmental aspect to them. It doesn't mean the person's better or whatever, but they occur at these different levels, and they're called character defenses when they're locked into as an identity and or as a constant instead of being able to go into the mode when it's appropriate, right? But I think it's important developmentally. It's like, well, what the person that's stuck in the masochistic, what do they need? They need to move towards the psychopathic. There's no fix down in there.
Yeah.
You got to come up out of there. Because if you think of this idea of nested hierarchy, the schizophrenic or the schizoaffective or the schizotypal or the, all the whole spectrum of the schizo ailments. It's like, well, what's needed in that part? Well, you need to go out into the next layer of organization, because that layer of organization is schizophrenic.
Yeah.
There's no organizing. It's that you shift and your mind assumes a different contextual focus. And now that schizophrenic energy that the mind was overwhelmed by and living in becomes the fuel that feeds the next level. And so at the next level, now what? Now there's all this neediness and this oral, whatever. And it's like, what needs to happen? The person needs to shift to the next level. So, in the same with physical, emotional, mental. It's like, well, if I'm laying in bed and my alarm goes off, and physically I'm like, oh no, I actually feel like sleeping longer. My body's telling me that, actually if I was just going to listen on a physical level, I'd turn the alarm off and I'd go back to sleep. Okay, but you got to override that in much of life, right? You have to have at least the ability to override that and go, no, I gotta go to work. I gotta override the physical with the mental, and I gotta use my will to do this level instead of this level.
Yeah.
So our mind, again, this idea of going up these levels, and that which was below, that which we thought we were a thing, right? We thought we were this thing in this dimension.
Yeah.
We need to get this awareness that's actually out here.
Yeah.
To look into that and see that, okay, from here, we see that, okay, actually there's no like winning that battle. There's no organizing all that. We shift up to the next level. And then again, it varies moment to moment.
Yeah.
If I just feel tired, it's like, well, too bad. I override it, get up, get in the shower, get your ass to work. But if I notice, no, I actually have like a really bad fever, and then it might be okay. No, I got to call in sick to work.
Mm-hmm.
We're constantly making these decisions, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just saying at times we have to be able to override, go to that larger context, and sacrifice the self at that lower level.